Today, we're diving into an absolute masterpiece of 20th century literature, E.M. Forster's A Passage to India. And this book grapples with a question that feels somehow just as raw and urgent today as it did 100 years ago.
And that question is this: can genuine friendship, I mean real human connection, truly flourish when it's trapped inside a system built on power, on prejudice, and on division? This powerful inquiry is the absolute core of the entire story.
And for the author, E.M. Forster, this was anything but a hypothetical exercise. His 1924 novel is his deeply personal and profound attempt to answer this very dilemma, all set against the incredibly tense backdrop of the British Raj in India. So to really get what makes this book so powerful, we kind of have to get to know the author a little bit, and the world he was trying to make sense of. See, Forster wasn't just some casual tourist passing through. Born in 1879, he was shaped by these very liberal, humanist ideals. Then he went to India, first in 1912 and again in 1921. And those visits, well, they were completely transformative. He saw the reality of colonial rule up close. The good, the bad, the incredibly complicated. And all of that was poured right into what would become his masterpiece. If you had to boil Forster's entire philosophy down to just two words, it would be these: only connect. It's this beautiful, simple plea, right? A call for empathy and understanding. But that's the tragedy at the heart of this book. It shows how a massive, impersonal system can take that most basic human desire and make it feel almost impossible. And that's the core conflict right there. It's this constant tug of war. On one side, you've got this very human impulse for friendship, but pulling in the exact opposite direction is the crushing weight of empire, a system that by its very nature needs to keep people separate and unequal. That tension is the engine that drives the whole story. Now, Forster does something really clever with the structure. The novel is broken into three distinct parts, and it's a symbolic journey. We start with a fragile glimmer of hope, then we plunge into absolute chaos, and finally, we emerge into a new, much more complex kind of understanding. Let's start that journey. First stop, the mosque, a place that represents a fleeting moment of pure possibility. So picture this. Inside a mosque, we have Dr. Aziz, who is Indian, meeting Mrs. Moore, an Englishwoman, and right away she shows respect for his culture. In that shared sacred space, a real connection forms. For just a moment, you think, hey, maybe empathy can win. Maybe it can bridge this massive divide. But that fragile hope is completely shattered when we get to the novel's philosophical center, the caves. Now, the Marabar Caves, wow, they are one of the most haunting symbols in all of literature. Think of them as a black hole for meaning. They represent pure chaos. A place where all the tidy logic and clear answers of the West just completely fall apart. Because inside these caves, every single sound, whether it's a word of love or a cry of hate, gets flattened into this one single, meaningless and terrifying echo. It's the sound of communication breaking down, of moral certainty collapsing. It just plunges the characters into this state of profound confusion. This whole experience is the ultimate example of what Forster called the muddle. That's his word for the vast, messy, spiritual complexity of India that just refuses to fit into the neat little boxes of the Western mind. The caves literally force the characters to stare into the face of this model, and frankly, it breaks them. And the chaos doesn't stay in the caves. It spills out into the real world, leading to a terrible false accusation and a trial. But this isn't a trial about finding the truth. No way. It becomes a showdown between colonial power, which just wants to reinforce its stereotypes, and the very idea of justice, which gets completely swallowed up by the muddle. This brings us to the final, and perhaps most complex part of the novel, the temple. Here, during this wild, chaotic, but also joyful Hindu festival, Forster offers us a totally different path. Instead of trying to solve the muddle with logic, this worldview just embraces it. It accepts all the contradiction and chaos as part of a bigger cosmic harmony. It suggests that maybe reconciliation isn't about finding answers, but about acceptance. And yet the novel's ending is famously bittersweet. It's not all wrapped up in a neat bow. The Englishman, Fielding, and the Indian, Aziz, they do manage to reconcile their personal friendship. But they're forced to face a painful truth. As long as the political system of empire exists, they can't really be friends. Not equals. In the final scene, even the horses they're riding physically swerve apart, symbolizing the political forces keeping them divided. So, let's step back. 100-year-old book about colonial India. Why are we still talking about it? Why does Forster's muddle matter so much right now?
Well, because the core problems he wrote about are still our problems, aren't they? The struggle to communicate across cultural divides, the challenge of seeing the humanity in others despite political differences. That sounds a lot like our own interconnected, yet deeply polarized world.
When you really look at it, this novel is just a masterclass. It explores cultural misunderstanding. It shows us the limits of good intentions when you're up against systemic injustice. And it reveals just how profoundly power imbalances can distort even our most personal relationships.
And so, A Passage to India leaves us right back where we started, echoing Forster's own plea. In our own world, which is full of its own muddles and divisions, how do we find the courage, the empathy, and the humility to only connect?